All right, we're going to get going. It's TV 79. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this special meeting of the Operations Planning Committee for Wednesday, January 15th to order. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah.
Happy New Year.
Yes,
We are.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year. We will start, we'll go to my left this morning. Good morning, Tara.
Good morning, everyone. You all know we're in the middle of our budget process. That's not really the news. I'd say the biggest thing I have today that I'd like to be able to coordinate, and it may be a little bit of P&Z, and Jamie, you can kind of help us with which town authority to talk to. But we're hearing a lot from parents on transportation. John got the benefit of being there through our public comment last night. Thank you for attending with the Board of Finance comments. But there are Board of Ed concerns that we can look at in terms of radius, but there's also some general traffic concerns with construction coming up. I know we touched on it last time. What is that going to do to our walkers? We've reached out to the police department to kind of have them review our entire walking plan and see if they see any areas of concern. But I just would like some help anticipating the project's beginning and what that might do to sidewalk areas and or if there's any busing concerns. So if you guys can put your thinking caps on, or Steve, if you know of anything in P&Z with start times that we can maybe message out correctly, or if Jeremy does to parents, just some more information so we can get out to the public would be great. I've also asked the district, so Kate, I think Rich will probably come to you to provide our entire walking plan. And then as you guys are going forward, if there's any plans for sidewalks, you're just kind of in the know about that piece of pedestrian traffic. So I don't think it necessarily creates work for you at this point, but I just think everyone should kind of know currently what we're walking, and then if there is any change in policy, we would modify that and get it over to you.
Yeah, and that's important as we're working on our budget, and Ed has some capital projects in there for sidewalks to know where they may provide the most benefit.
Okay, so if it hasn't already gotten to you, because I asked to get to you, I will make sure it gets to you ASAP.
Okay.
With
So-
regards,
Go ahead, Steve.
With regards to specifics, what walking distance are you worried about? Because I don't think a lot of students walk down Heights Road or walk down the Post Road.
So we have a 2-mile radius to the high school. That's really where we're hearing, especially there are kids who we're hearing from parents, and I've actually asked the superintendent to look at the scope and to kind of deal individually with parents, which is really his role. But also, I think in Rowan Heights, at least there are claims that students will be affected by that.
To walk down Heights Road?
Yep.
They-
I mean, that's something
they'll
that they
Rowan
can
Avenue.
They'll walk down to Rowan Avenue.
Right. There's no
Um,
sidewalks
Hollow
on
Tree.
that. There's no
How
sidewalks.
I guess I'd say this, the route kids take, we can't define. So if we just know the information and can message out on that if we need to, or look if we need to adjust internally, either with traffic patterns or talking to the bus company, or just even signaling delays so that parents aren't
What
concerned.
changed? Something happened, and I'm not clued into that, that's created this. What changed?
I would say that there is a neighborhood over around Fitch Avenue in Dickinson, where it appears we have a group that has aged into the high school, and that's a new walking radius from the middle school, and
okay.
so they are affected.
Got it.
And that's not to say that their concerns aren't valid or not. I've asked the superintendent to look at that, and the police department, he's worked closely with Don to kind of look at what's safe or not. But I think sometimes aging groups,
Okay.
we
Got it.
tend to see it. We saw it in homes a couple of years ago, and the police were super helpful. I think in some areas they said, yes, provide a bus. In other areas, they assured parents it was safe. In other areas, I think they came back and asked the town to just do some simple trimming and that it would be safe. So generally, when we all work together, I think we find a way to solve this problem. But yeah, it was a
Okay.
bit of a bubble up, and you
Got
saw a
it.
little bit of it last night. But there's been no policy change, and there's been no sidewalk change. I think there's just
A demographic change.
a demographic change.
Okay.
Are you looking to see like what the demo schedule is going to be so that you can notify kids to walk around? Or?
Yeah, so any type of that information would help. If we have a demo
See,
schedule.
Well, I know, what's it, prism painting, I believe is Martin Luther King Day.
Prism painting?
That's over here.
It's over
by
in the
On
Heights,
Road
It's
on
a
Road
bridal
Avenue
show.
rather, yeah.
Just by-
And They've pulled the permit for the drainage, but I'm not sure how much that would affect the roadways.
Okay.
But I'll talk to Jeremy.
Yeah, so maybe we can
He
just
and Pete have
gather
the-
information and then kind of, my guess is,
Would
you
Rich
guys-
be the person to
I
send?
think
what-
Rich is, I'm gonna make point on this, so if you
Yeah.
could send that over to him.
Prism painting is one day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it should be,
That's-
it should be
you're not-
done without any interference with schools, because schools will be closed.
Great, we love that.
And
West
I just-
Avenue, there's no sidewalks on that side of the street. The road, Heights Road, there's no sidewalks on that side of the street. Post Road, there's no sidewalks on that side of the street.
yeah, I think we'll have to be thinking about where construction trucks will be coming in and out as
Yeah, we
well.
talked about that.
And crossing,
Yeah.
crossing is always an issue.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably just a multifaceted approach, and as we do our work, I just wanted to let everyone know, if you have any information, we're happy to receive it, because we just want to make sure kids are safe walking to school.
So when you say provide a walking plan, do you mean the school bus policy, the radius to each school? Is that what you mean by your
I
walking
think
plan?
what I've asked Rich to do is actually provide the town, kind of the neighborhoods that fall within that radius, just so you're aware.
Is
You know,
it 2 miles to, it's 2 miles to the high school?
2 miles to the high school, I believe a mile to the middle school, off the top of my head, I don't know.
It's a
And
mile-
it's
it's a mile.
0.5 to the elementary.
I would think that planning and zoning could
Yeah,
pretty
so-
easily do that with the GIS system, just draw the circle.
We have it, we can do it, and we can have it, and then you guys can match it up, or
Yeah.
whomever's the appropriate authority can match it up. But we're hearing, what we're receiving some comments on is like, well, the sidewalks are in disrepair, and that may or may not be true, but we don't have any authority to.
Maybe in the eye of the beholder.
And there is a little bit of eye of the beholder, what you're comfortable with your child doing versus what holistically the police might say we feel is safe walking. So we're trying to be respectful and receive the comments, and also kind of work with everyone on this about what's the best way to assess a situation, and just let people know that we've assessed it and we feel confident in the decision, and/or the town has assessed it and feels confident in their decision. And then all parents have an individual pathway still if they feel that they have an individual issue. So it is kind of a bigger project, but there's no way for the board just to make kind of a blunt policy change that will solve the problem without kind of talking to everybody.
So I'm really glad that we're talking about this. As you know, walking student safety plan has been something that we've talked about in the Board of Selectmen for a long time. And we're happy to take your policy. What I'd like to ask is will there be any discussion about the policy? Are you anticipating any changes to the policy?
So I think what we are doing is collecting the information, and then we will take a look at the policy just as part of a healthy review. I can't say, because I haven't really heard from any board member, whether there's a desire to change that policy.
Okay.
But I think that enough people have come forward that it's worth reviewing. I think the last time it was reviewed was 2009, and so it's time.
Okay.
The outcome of that, I don't know.
Yep.
But it would have significant impacts. We did rough estimates if we, let me be clear, student safety is the first issue, right? Secondly, then you look at the impact. So we just kind of picked a number as a general number of about what if we change the 2 mile radius to a 1.5 mile radius. That has an impact of about $600,000 on the budget. So there's also real, that's why policy can be blunt, right? You don't want to just make a change because, oh, that sounds good, without really understanding all of the effects. But on the other hand, we want to make sure our kids are safe, which is where I think, the police as the independent kind of traffic authority are really the best ones to make a determination about what's safe or what needs to
Sure.
change. We were happy to engage them. And then, like I said, passing on our kind of radius to you all is really just informative as you move forward.
Yep. So the police commission is the local traffic authority, so they have jurisdiction over the roadways. They probably can do some sidewalk assessment, but that typically falls into the purview of our Public Works Department. So Public Works and the local traffic authority can certainly work together. For any parents that are watching this meeting, if your student walks to school and you note a problem with any sidewalks or any condition that you believe is unsafe, you can put a Q alert in through our Public Works Department, and then, you know, that you get immediate assistance on that. The other way certainly is if something comes to the board's attention or through Rich or Dr. Adley, they can work directly with Kate or our department heads to rectify that. You know, I don't want any issues that crop up to get lost in the bureaucracy. So there's, you know, certainly department heads should be working with one another. We do have a plan that we did a couple years ago called the Pedestrian Infrastructure Advisory Committee, where we had this awesome group of volunteers literally walk and canvass the town. So we have the basis, we have a good start for a plan. What I think we need to do, Steve, and I've mentioned this to Jeremy, I'm not aware that with the approved developments, that there is a traffic pattern for construction traffic. But I think there needs to be one. And I think that the district needs to be made aware of, you know, when Walgreens is demolished, how will the dump trucks be removing the debris? How will materials, what's the route that materials will take to get to the construction sites?
Yeah.
I think that would be very, very helpful. The other question I have for you, Tara, is I know that the one situation that arose over here was someone off near Fitch, I believe, not on Fitch, but near Fitch. That's actually 2.4 miles from the high school. So I'm wondering, you know, obviously nothing is exact, but when you have a situation where you have a student that falls just outside the bus policy, is that something that you'll handle on a one-off basis for those students?
Yeah, 2.4. So without commenting on the specific
Yeah,
situation, I think sometimes it's how it's measured, right? How you measure your distance from the school versus how
Yeah.
a system does. So that would be an individual situation
Okay.
that would go. But from a broad speak, 2.4, if you are 2.4 miles from the school, you have a bus.
Okay.
So that might be in how and who's measured, or some miscommunication. So that person would talk to Dr. Adley about
Okay.
making sure that that's resolved.
Okay.
And I think part of it is what was happening for a lot of years as kids were hopping on buses, but because of a demographic change, the buses are overcrowded. So then we, on the same side, had parents saying, I have buses that are overcrowded, and so we need to make sure, you know, both sets of children are safe. And so I think that, again, to John's question, some of what happened is because you have a demographic shift. You know, 1 and 2 kids who are just kind of hopping on buses have now been said, you know, like, what is your assigned bus? So,
Okay.
but I think if we can all kind of work together as best we can
Yeah.
to kind of solve it. So
Mhm.
Kate, are you okay at least initially if I have Rich
Absolutely.
contact you?
Absolutely.
And then you can disperse out where
Yep.
appropriate?
Yep.
Thanks.
Just a note on the transportation of debris out, construction debris out of certain sites. When the high school was done, planning and zoning was meticulous about requiring, I mean, I think they had it down to how many truckloads were going to be going out, and it was a big part of the plan, so it's a very good point. And there is precedent for that.
And we brought it up, that was my homework assignment from last OPC meeting.
Yeah.
And we brought it up at our past P&Z meeting, and it's going to be weaved into our future resolutions for significant projects.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. You know, I do, and I certainly get nervous about kids on the road now, with or without construction
Yeah.
traffic, you know, crossing over 2 ramps, on and off ramps.
And
Um,
especially with the distractibility of the devices
Yeah.
they're using.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why we really do need the police to kind of assess it, because
Yeah.
I think as you go through town, there's certain curves that I wouldn't want my kids on, but other people might be okay, and that's where we kind of just need that independent authority to be like, is this safe, is this not? And some things are safer, I imagine they might find something safe for high school students that is not safe for an elementary school
Sure.
student, so some of it might be scaffold. I just don't want to weigh on any particular area until I hear from them.
Yep.
Just one lesson real quick, Norotan Avenue is being widened by Chase Bank, next to Prism. When that date is, I don't know. But there was a significant traffic study done from West Avenue to what's the?
Ledge.
Ledge Road. So that was done, all those lights are going to be retimed, and that's a lot of expense that Federal's paying. So that work's already been done, plus you're widening the other West Avenue and Norotan Avenue.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of work happening in that corridor over the next couple of years.
Right.
Aside from the redevelopment activities, there's going to be an intersection reconfiguration at Norotan and West. That's going to happen sooner rather than later. And then there's going to be an intersection reconfiguration at Ledge and Norotan. So there will be construction for years in that corridor. So, you know, families and students should be made aware of that, and we will make sure that the police and, you know, if the situation arises where we feel we need crossing assistance, for example, we'll have to talk about that when the time comes.
So just as much increased communications we can have on
Yeah.
all this, I think will go a long way.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's all I've got today. It's enough.
Seth?
Well, we have an RTM meeting coming up on the 27th. We're going to have some interesting things going on. We have Tom Mullen coming from Stamford. He's the development officer for the city of Stamford. He's very entertaining. Always has something interesting to say about what's going on over there, and we've asked him to relate what's going on there to where we are and how we're involved. Darien. Jessica Casey is coming from Norwalk. Great person. So I think they'll be very interesting. I think, and I told them I was going to leave about 5 minutes for each one of them to answer questions. So that will be.
What's the purpose of their coming?
To tell us about what's going on in both Stamford and Norwalk as far as economic development programs.
What they're doing to incent people
Yep.
to come to. Okay.
Yeah, and what projects they have going on. We also are going to vote on the teacher's contract, so that's our one piece of voting business. We also have to replace a person on the Blight board, so we've sent out a notice to everybody in the RTM saying, listen, we need some volunteer here. And we're looking perhaps at a minor change in the ordinances because we're finding that scheduling meetings, the ordinances are very specific on when certain meetings have to take place, and we're finding that quite often they land right smack dab on a holiday. So, and there's not any flexibility. We change it anyway, but we're looking at doing that. So Frank Kemp will be calling Jamie to see how to do that.
No,
So that's
good.
what's going on.
I'd add to that sometimes the RTM meetings happen in the sequence of when things get approved in town at times that are not perfectly aligned with the calendars of the other boards. So maybe if Frank calls, we can kind of coordinate that a little bit, just sort of say what things need to be approved when, and is the RTM meeting scheduled appropriately.
Well, what will happen is that we'll just make it much more flexible. You can do it within a 2-week period, let's say, of when you would normally have to schedule it, broadening so that you have more flexibility. So that's what's going on with the representative town meeting.
Great, thank you, Seth. John, I don't know what time you have to leave today.
I'll get
so-
to 9 o'clock train, I'm good for me.
Perfect, okay, then we'll move on to Steve.
Thank you. I don't have too much to add this month. Last month, we talked about the 3 major projects, the Nature Center, BMW, and Hollow Tree Self-Storage. Those are still pending. Each one of the 3 major projects are moving forward at their own design pace. The Kalari BMW, that proposal to change the zoning on that, just the zoning, it's had nothing to do with the site plan, was we told them to draft a positive report. Self-storage is going to come in, and we also heard, we're going to hear from the DCA at our next meeting, the 21st, about some special event that they're having that nobody knows about. because that's what I was told to say. The only other thing relative to, I think it's of note, I really like the people that are on the Architectural Review Board. We had a little bit of, a lot of questions when, I think it's what's the address, I think? The white building that's in the back behind, Brooks Brothers. We had some
Oh,
discussions at the time of that when they were developing it.
White frame. It's an
Yeah.
old.
It's gonna be
Still
the-
setting though,
Okay.
maybe.
Yeah, it was good to have something. But it's gonna be the Paris Cafe. It was proved to be a Paris Cafe, which is gonna be like a 2.5-story restaurant building. We had some questions relative to the architecture and the lights. They went to the Architecture Review Board, and they have to go back either a third or fourth time. So the Architecture Review Board is making sure that building's gonna be very pretty.
It's going to be a 2.5-story restaurant?
Yeah.
Interesting.
They're not making it taller, they're digging down deeper. So the
Interesting.
basement's not gonna be at the first floor.
But keeping this original structure?
Yeah, the original structure and the height of the building. The building, nothing is changing in terms of height and width, but they're adding on decks and terraces and digging down to make the first floor.
Nice.
The lower level of the first floor. It's gonna be, it should look really nice.
Well, it's on a hillside, so I can see where they
Yeah.
could do that.
Yeah, it's gonna be kind of cool. And the second level, the middle level of the building is gonna be equal to the first level of the parking lot behind it,
Right.
because that's pretty much where it is right now.
Mhm.
Then the only other item relative to homework from the last meeting, I mentioned it a minute ago, you asked me to look into traffic patterns and the way traffic gets done during construction projects. I put that on the list to go forward. The other thing we talked about at the last meeting was how the construction sites are going to be screened during construction periods with, like, coming soon or architecture or murals that you asked for. And I told Jeremy to go back to the Architecture Review Board and see if they have any ideas. And I don't know, you can fill in when you want to at that time.
Okay.
That's pretty much it for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Exciting.
Yeah, it is. The vibrancy of town, everything happening is very
Yeah.
terrific. It's drawing a lot of young families to town,
It is.
continues to.
Yeah.
So, okay, session starts, we're in a short session year. Session starts Wednesday, February 5th. We end Wednesday, May 6th, so it's a rapid pace from start to finish. Short session means we only do bills of fiscal matters. However, committees can raise, so nobody can introduce individual bills. Committees have to raise anyone who brings forward an individual bill. So we don't do as many bills, but it feels like we do nonetheless. Tolls are back on the agenda, probably for special session. We don't have any language yet. We don't have details. I think most of us agree that we do need to fix the infrastructure. I don't think there's any question there, but I think for many of us, the concern remains that we have a special transportation fund, and for years, money has been diverted from that fund for other uses. So it's, the other issue, we spend far more per mile for road infrastructure, transportation infrastructure than any other state in the country. So, and in my view, until we fix both of those things, I don't believe we should be putting a fee on our residents. So it's, although I get, in concept, I understand tolling. I mean, I think so many states have it. It is a logical fee for people who are using a road. But again, until we fix the abuses in the system, I don't believe we should be, I don't support tolls at this point.
Terry?
Yes.
When you, as soon as you get a draft of the bill, can you forward it to
Yes.
me? The reason why I'm asking, I believe it's intended to be heavy trucks only?
Yes.
To begin with, at least?
Correct.
I know the most recent iteration of the bill, which was for all vehicles.
Right.
Included language in it that gave a contribution, if you will,
Mhm.
to the municipality that hosted a gantry. So there, in that previous plan, there was a
Right.
gantry in the Merritt Parkway in Greenwich. There was one on I-95 in Stamford. There was one in Norwalk. And each of those towns was going to get a percentage of the toll revenue.
Right.
So, I think it was to help offset, mitigate any issues that, were raised from tolling. Well, in my opinion, since you really can't get from Stamford to Norwalk without going through Darien or part of New Canaan, we weren't, going to benefit from any of that revenue. So I'd like to know particularly that component.
Right.
If that's still going to exist in the future bill, if there's going to be revenue sharing with municipalities.
It's
Can we
a-
put a gantry in front of the Oxbridge Elementary School?
No, we cannot.
It'll slow down
We
traffic.
can share revenue along corridors. Yeah.
Slow down traffic.
Trying to mitigate costs.
It's a
right?
moving target.
Yeah, and just conceptually, if you could help me by
Right.
maybe asking some questions about the idea of municipal revenue sharing from tolling revenue.
I can do that.
I don't think it's a wise concept,
Right.
but I'm interested.
Well, it's another distraction. It's another.
Well, it's a little bit,
just-
it's a little bit pay to play, right?
Right. We
You
need
know?
to keep it straightforward, transparent.
Right, yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think the issue of controls is critical.
Mhm.
When you start sending a lot of money to Hartford, as you said,
Yeah.
particularly where it concerns transportation, they've been
Right.
skimming and using it
Right.
for other things, and I remember when the income tax was enacted, and that was gonna we were all set, we never have to worry about it again. Well, I'm just concerned we've got another major revenue source going up there, and controlling where that money goes is gonna be key.
Right.
Yeah, I'd like to keep an open mind about it.
Mhm.
I share Terry's sentiments about, we're not addressing some of the big problems that we have, but we have to fix our transportation. And if this is targeted, if it's tolls that are put in places that actually raise revenue to build the bridge that's being tolled, that makes good sense to me.
That's easy, yeah.
Correct. So, we'll see how it rolls out, and, obviously, an expansion of tolling to passenger vehicles is probably on everyone's mind,
Right.
I would imagine.
Right. So I will keep everyone apprised of what
Thank
goes
you.
on.
Yeah.
Can I ask one question?
Yep.
Did I hear you right that there would be one in Stanford,
Yep.
Greenwich, and Norwalk, so 3 in Fairfield County?
The one in Greenwich was Merritt,
Yeah,
the Merritt Parkway.
yeah. There's more than 3 in Fairfield County. We actually had the largest
Really?
concentration of
Yeah.
gantries in the original plan.
Wow.
Yeah.
Original plan last year
That's
had
way wrong.
13 gantries, where there were 4 in 1983. The plan last year had 13 gantries between Greenwich and West Haven.
Correct.
Yeah. We've talked about this a little bit. To me, it's 1 per
Right.
county,
Right.
And
And the
that's-
cost to those on passenger cars, the cost to those who are driving from Bridgeport to Stamford, it's unfair.
Yeah,
It's not right. Until we fix our fiscal situation, I don't think we should be doing
And
this.
my only other question is, the benchmark that you said, we spend more in infrastructure cost per mile than any?
Transportation, correct.
What's that benchmark relative to, Iowa or
All
California?
The
the
country,
states.
the nation.
Yeah, I'd like to see the numbers behind that, because.
Yeah.
It is-
Yankee,
it-
go to Yankee website. They've got
Yeah.
exhaustive research on it.
Okay.
Very thorough.
The commissioner
there are
pushes
other
back a
sources.
little bit on that statistic, but that's a statistic that's been out there.
Yeah.
Not this current commissioner, but the former commissioner said that was, sort of looking at in states that have a lot of rural areas that don't have a lot of paved and improved roadways. So it is good to look at the data, look what's behind the data.
Okay.
Terry, what's your thought on that transportation lockbox? That'll help some of the controls you're worried about, or no?
Great question. The issue with that is it doesn't determine what goes into the lockbox. So funds can, once they're in, they can't be swept out. And that's what's happened in the past. But it doesn't dedicate funds that go into it. For example, the sales tax revenue this year on used cars should have gone into the special transportation fund. It didn't, it got swept. So that's the
you would
issue with
argue
the
tolls
lockbox.
would have to be dedicated to the lockbox.
Yeah, you'd have to
Yes.
legislate that.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
How do they get
Good
away
question.
with the sweeping? Is it a different law passed that says?
No, they just don't put the money into the fund. So we didn't.
So what, if there's something that's saying they should be putting the money into the fund, how are they getting away with not doing it?
There's nothing
I
that
don't
says
think
they
there
have
is.
to put.
The
key word is
That's-
should.
We tried to. put-
Should as opposed to must.
Right, we tried to put that into the language and it didn't fly, so.
Okay, thank you, Terry. John?
One editorial comment on that, there's a lot of very interesting history to read, particularly in the 19th century, about how transportation infrastructure revolutionized the economics of the country. And you look at the development of farm
Yeah.
country in the Midwest and the ability to export products with the construction of railroads and, the Erie Canal and the St. Lawrence Waterway. All these different things made economic progress possible that just simply wasn't before. And so it's a real regret that just nationally we were not able to make leaps in terms of transportation infrastructure like we used to at that time. I think part of the cost you're talking about is there's a lot of regulatory requirements, there are construction standards, there are environmental concerns, there's a litigation infrastructure that allows people to continue the discussions about those things that add to cost, complexity, and delay. And in a way, that's good that we're protecting that, but we cannot build an infrastructure like we used to as a result. And so I think if we could solve that problem in Connecticut, I think people would be perfectly fine with tolls, right? Because they
Right.
could see toll money and, geez, I spent a lot of money, but look, this infrastructure, it's a night and day difference.
Right.
In
Fair
2 or
exchange.
3, 4 years.
Right.
As opposed to 10 years of litigation and nothing. I think that's what, if you could get to the point where people could literally see significant changes in infrastructure in a quick way, that would be great, but that's a bigger problem to solve. My comments are brief. I started the budget process. I gave a couple of brief comments to the Board of Education yesterday about their budget. It's come in at 3.46%, at least the draft that the superintendent has sent to the board, so I know they're going to be spending time on that. We asked for a bit of additional information around calculation of the excess cost grant, impact of the union contract, and a few other things. We also brought up this transfer analysis that we've done that we'll send to the Board of Education shortly. In my view, that's all innocuous and is meant really to help with the budgeting process as opposed to being anything more than that. Oxbridge Building Committee, as we know, continues to make good progress. They're at the design point for the school, and there's some members of that committee, particularly Diane Boston, that are just amazing in terms of the amount of work they put into this. Hugely talented, and I'm very appreciative of the work, effort, and capability of all those committee members. It's fantastic. Board of Finance, next topic is to get our budget assignments done, and we've finished up our calendar, so we're ready to go in terms of our reviews. We will maximize attendance at both Board of Education meetings as well as the department presentations that Kate will lead for the Board of Selectmen, so that, again, in this spirit of minimizing duplication of meetings, we will do that to the maximum extent possible. We're also going to make sure we've got good collaboration with F&B and Jack Davis as part of our inquiry so that this process goes along smoothly for this cycle. That's it.
If I can just ask, because after you left, there was a little bit of conversation, and I was, if we could get that analysis as soon as possible.
Yep.
I know it started in June. That would be helpful. And then I did have board members ask, and this is probably just, this is just linguistically how we talk about it, that they're not actual transfers. It's kind of just cost accounting in terms that the board doesn't approve most of these. It's in the administration's discretion. So we'll come up with the right term for it. But after you left, multiple members asked me to make sure that we're not calling it what is a true board transfer versus what is.
I'm told that the English language has something like 1 million words in it versus the French language, which is artificially limited, I think, to 300,000. So the good news is I'm sure there's a word.
We can come up. I kept saying transfer because I knew exactly what John was talking about, but I did have members say, let's point out that we made very clear what is a transfer and what is not. So we'll come up with the right terms, but they did ask me.
Some cool medieval term.
Yes.
That's something I hadn't contemplated, because on the Board of Selectmen, discusses and takes action on transfers. So
We call them all transfers, doesn't matter who, we have, the Board of Finance is granted authority to the finance director to make transfers up to a certain amount under certain conditions, and she and I jointly can do transfers under certain conditions. We
Right.
call them all transfers. If we're moving money from one line item to another,
right.
Yeah,
call
so
them all
we
transfers.
always did as well. I think that was kind of just it, but we were very clear last year about the state's authority and who can move money. So I mention it only because multiple board members asked, and I was referring to them all as transfers last night too, because we typically, things move from a line, we've called them that. But kind of our new business department would like to make very clear what they do versus what we do, and also what requires board votes and what doesn't. So in honor of that, I will figure out the best way
We
to
can create
describe
a
it.
word.
But the most important thing is to receive it. So it's been talked about a lot, and so I have a lot of board members kind of hungry just to say, what information is there and what can we best understand
I think
from
it'd be
it.
tremendously helpful to see where your budgeting had to be adjusted during the year and, help you make decisions going forward as to how you might allocate your resources. I think-
Yeah, we had some conversation about it. Someone was like, well, you transfer from schools. Well, part of that is when you look at long-term subs, what you're really doing is you're offsetting your salary accounts from a teacher into the long-term sub account. So it's very difficult year to year, but yes, you're always going to see a transfer, let's say, well, not always, but pick a school from Darien High School going into long-term sub, just given the population, you're more likely to have someone. So we talked about those nuances, but without the data, we were talking about it a little bit abstractly, or at least understanding the analysis. So when we can
Yeah,
get that,
so
I think
will-
everyone's happy to take a look at it.
As soon as I can clear the decks on a couple other things, I shall send that forthwith.
Thank you.
So, no problem. The theory of this case, as I said before, is there are several budgets that appear to be over budgeted. Maybe not consistently, but certainly over time it appeared that way, and they were sources of funds that were funding other things that had been typically under budgeted. It's not terrible. The whole issue is not about the aggregate spending. The issue is that those items that were budgeted for those purposes was what the board approved. And the money was not spent on that. It was in fact spent on other stuff, right, that the board didn't take into account and approve as part of its process. And I know that certainly for the Board of Selectmen, they spent a lot of time on that. So the question to be considered by your board is simply for those things that are typically over budgeted and under budgeted, can there almost be a swap, or can you lower these budgets and actually spend the money on the stuff that is the purpose for which it's intended? That's the
no,
sole- that's
we'd
the
love to
sole
see
nature
it,
of
and
all
we
that.
can either
And I'll send that
understand
to you
it or-
for your consideration.
Great, thank you.
Great. I have admittedly lost track of the Board of Finance's decisions, if any, on credit card fees.
Oh, right.
So that discussion is ongoing.
Okay.
I think where we are on that is there's a mild debate about whether you want to charge proactively for the use of credit cards or simply build the cost of using credit cards into your fees. The advantage of the former is that it's transparent. The advantage of the latter is it doesn't disadvantage or impair the use of credit cards where people decide not to do that and go back to cash or something else to avoid that fee. We're of two mindsets on that. The other thing I want to make sure of is that whatever we do takes into account not just credit cards, but other payment vehicles from Venmo to wire transfers to ACH and all that. And really, we want to coordinate with you. This is, from our standpoint, it's just a matter of the cost of all of that.
Yeah.
But the management of all that and getting to an optimal answer is really kind of an administrative thing through the Board of Selectmen. And I just want to make sure that that is coordinated with the Board of Education. I also understand that there are certain departments that are reluctant to go one way or the other on all this. So trying to get a clean, consistent policy that everybody could say, that's great, it's the right economic answer, it positions us for all these current and evolving payment methods, best practice, all set.
Yeah, I think, the problem with the various departments is that some departments have the right to set their fees. Other departments have to come to the Board of Selectmen to set their fees. So that's where we'd have to be persuasive with the ones who set their own fees. But we're doing the technology assessment. We had a kickoff meeting. I had a kickoff meeting last week with the consultant. One of the things that we have asked them to look at is our points of sale and our methods of payment. What other methods of payment can we look at? ACH, Venmo, et cetera, PayPal. So you might want to wait until we get that
Yeah, this is
back.
part of the reason I haven't pushed all
Um,
this, just because there's a lot of
yeah.
this work going on.
I mean, I'm personally of the opinion that these days, accepting credit cards is a normal part of business, and it should be, the processing should be just a cost of our doing business. I know that's not universally shared, but let's wait and see what the technology assessment tells us about how we're processing and other forms of payment we can take. Because really, our goal is to make doing business with the town easier.
Yeah.
I think my general view is that I agree with that, except that I would say that the cost of doing business with the town and taking advantage of town services, my inclination would be to build the cost of that into the pricing for that service. So buying a beach pass,
Yeah.
dump stickers, all that sort of thing, build that into the pricing. I
Yeah.
think where the
Doesn't
town-
work with taxes.
Right, but I think where the town initiates the bill, right? So this would be taxes, big stuff, in all of that. I think that those costs, that needs to be an added cost to use
Yeah.
credit cards, particularly for taxes, you
Yeah,
can.
yeah. And I think Kathy, when we had a discussion with her about the budget, she pointed out that more people do it by ACH than with credit
Well,
cards.
there you go.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, for certain
Yeah.
things.
For payment of taxes. The
Right.
fee is, it's a lower
Car
fee.
taxes too, or just real estate taxes?
You can do both.
And
But the
sewer
fee for
taxes.
using ACH, sewer's just coming on.
Yeah.
The ACH fee is much lower. It's like $2 per transaction.
$2 or $3.
With if you use a credit card, it's a percentage,
Right.
which can be kind of hefty with some
Yes,
people.
very much so.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll be very quick. First of all, what an extraordinary kickoff to
Yes.
our bicentennial celebration
Yes.
on Friday evening. And I really want to thank Al Miller, Maggie McIntyre, Kate Larson, and the whole crew from the Bicentennial Committee who did an amazing job. It
Susan
was-
Marks.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a whole, I
Really-
don't want to miss anybody, so I would
No.
know. It was wonderful to see the auditorium all dressed up for the occasion, and it was really, Scott Pelley was incredible. The Tudor singers were amazing and really added a lot to the evening. By John. To that end, the Board of Selectmen has received a presentation from the Darien Historical Society. I think they're going to be rebranding themselves to be the Museum of Darien,
Yeah.
which is interesting and exciting. Along the lines of the digesting the credit card fees into our transactions, we now have to charge sales tax on parking. So our beach passes are actually passes to park, so we have to charge sales tax for those. And for our commuter parking, we have to charge sales tax. So we're in the process of trying to actually figure out that with our vendor and how we do that. It's probably easier for our parking pass people than it is for our daily parking. So we have some things to work out in that regard, but that's part of the new law with the new expansion of the sales tax. And I'd like to make sure that we make that transparent so that folks know what piece of that is the parking and what piece of it is sales tax. Our budget kicks off with Kate's presentation to the Board of Selectmen on Monday, the 27th. So hopefully we will be able to make it in a timely basis down to the RTM meeting, but Kate's delivery is
Make it
very
real
We'll
fast.
understand.
Yeah. There it is, it's good, just vote yes.
Exactly. And Kate.
And thank you for that.
Kate already mentioned
I'll
the
pass that
technology
along to the
assessment.
100.
I say I go with the same thing.
Kate already talked about the technology assessment, and Pear Tree Point is still percolating. I think they're in the process of finding which path they're going to take in terms of vendor use for their coastal engineering study. And we will continue to move forward in putting together the data behind that plan and bringing that plan to the public. So that's really it for me.
With regards to Pear Tree Point, I did ask the planning zoning director to look into the number of houses or significant structures that are built in flood zones. So he's gonna pull up that, I think I said at the last meeting, like almost all of Norotan Bay is in a flood zone.
Mhm.
Weed Beach was built in a flood zone, Middlesex Club was built in a flood zone.
Yeah, that's a great data.
It's not a foreign concept to build in a flood zone. We denied an application at 40 Brookside, which is across the street from Maplewood, right at the bottom of corner of,
That historic home.
right, that was supposed to be built in a flood zone. It was denied in the first go-around. We got sued by the owners, and now they're gonna go forward to be able to build that property at that property. The house at that property, which is in a flood zone.
So it's going to be an additional home. They've
Second
got-
house.
So they could subdivide that property?
Correct.
Despite it being in a flood zone?
Yeah, they're giving a conservation easement to the town. The initial plan had a sheer wall to hold up the house that was, I think, 9 feet tall. That wall got redesigned. There were some other issues there, but it's, if you go up Brookside a little bit further, and I forget the corner that it's on, there's another house when I first moved into town, which is, 15, 19 years ago? That's on the corner of, it's not Sedgwick, it's one of the, might be McLaren.
No, it's,
It's the
Yeah.
same exact
Right.
concept. It's the same
but
exact
how
concept.
can they, how were they given subdivision approval?
It fits. It's as of, the subdivision's
Because
as
of
of
the-
right.
Say that again?
The subdivision's as of right. For argument's sake, it's a, it's a 1 acre parcel
So
and
it's
a
1
half
acre.
acre zone.
Yeah.
So you can
Okay,
have two lots.
So
okay.
it's as of right.
Thank you.
But you still have to have setbacks and everything else. The existing house there, it's historical,
Right,
is, has a smaller side yard setback,
right,
which required a variance.
okay.
So that's where it got dicey.
But since they're in a flood zone, they have to comply with FEMA regulations in terms of elevating the structure.
Correct. Smart vents, which is, same, Weed Beach has got smart vents, Middlesex Club's got smart vents, all the houses in the bay have smart vents.
Hmm, okay, thank you.
I think the important element of what you just said is that, that was a court adjudicated case where the town denied an application because it was in a flood zone, but the court said that's not enough of a hardship
Right.
and allowed the construction to move forward. That's very interesting.
Right, so if for some reason it was ever denied because it was in a flood zone, and somebody sued the town, the Planning and Zoning Commission, it would not be favorable to the town, to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Plus, we have precedents that we've approved, things like Weed Beach, that's in a flood zone.
Yeah. Okay, that's very good to know.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, anything else this morning? If not, then we have minutes from our December 18th meeting, which we can take care of this morning. I'll give you a moment. And when you're ready, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Tara.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Steve. Let me know if there's any corrections or additions, please. Okay,
Well, good to me.
we have a motion and a second.
That's interesting.
The wine cellar.
Oh, yeah.
at The Hollow Tree Self-Storage.
Did you like that?
Is that so like,
It's
people can create their
people
own
can
wine
store
cellar?
their wine
I
collections
think
there.
it's if you can put your private reserve
Yeah.
in there. I don't think we're making wine in the basement.
No.
no, that's just interesting that,
It is
you know.
interesting.
Yeah.
That there's a market for that.
That's,
There's a big market for that, actually. There's facilities that are dedicated solely to wine storage
Hmm.
for people that collect.
Sure is.
Yeah. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any corrections or additions? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Great.
Aye.
Abstentions? Okay, motion carries. And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seth, may I have a
Second.
second? Second by Sue. All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thank you very